Okay, let's start. Hi, everyone. Good to see all of you. My name is 𝗦𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗻𝗀. I run the Defender for Cloud product team. And today, in this session, we're going to share quite some interesting news for you that are coming out as a releases this week. We're going actually to do it in a different way. It's not going to be a bunch of slides, so we will use most of the time with actual demo. And as we start, it will be interesting to go and perform some real attack on the environment that we're later on going to see from the defender side. And with me, Drew is going to introduce himself. And Drew, if you can also share a bit of your background, because it's very relevant.
Thank you so much, Oz. Yeah, so my name is 𝗦𝗽𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗻𝗀. I'm one of the I lead a team of what they call security global black belts focused on Defender for Cloud. Been with Microsoft about 10 years. Started as part of our Microsoft consulting services, helping organizations move to Azure with security and governance in mind. In about 2017 timeframe, we started seeing a lot of adversaries start targeting cloud environments. So I got hired from a team called DART, or the Detection and Response Team, and we're the customer-facing IR team that helps customers recover from what we call significant emotional events. It's typically APTs or nation states that go after typically things like identity compromises, cloud misconfigurations. And so this role as kind of as a cloud security architect type role, it's really a passion area for me, right? Because I've seen it from the worst possible scenarios for our customers. So today I'm gonna actually kind of walk you through a few attacks and see how we can mitigate it from a posture perspective, but also if it happened in your environment, detect on it. So for the first thing, what I'm showing you here is a colleague, let's just say they got initial access, they're already on your server. As most adversaries do, right, they're gonna look for how much permissions and how many privileges do I have on this server that I got access. Boom, just realized that this was a Kubernetes cluster. So as an adversary, once I realize kind of what I have, I'm gonna start looking for like, what can I do? So what you're gonna see here is they're gonna start, they actually get into the pod, and they're going to start deploying their tools and so their TTPs, or tactics, techniques, and procedures. What you see this adversary doing is starting to install Python, Nmap. These are very common tools that adversaries will run to actually be able to do the next stage of their attack. Now, what I'm going to show you that they're going to first do is they're actually going to install Nmap. And now we're going to start doing network scanning, right? As an adversary, I want to see what kind of permissions are available. I want to see, can I contact another server that's on the network? And we all know 3389, right? That's a Windows server box. And so I'm going to be like, hey, this Windows server, is it responding? Fortunately for our customer, like this Nmap didn't actually hit. But now the adversary is like, okay, what's my next stage? The next stage is I want sensitive information, because that's typically what adversaries are going after. If you're familiar with how cloud identities work, or cloud services work, we have a concept of managed identities, and we'll talk about it in a little bit. But managed identities is this idea that that cluster has permissions to a storage account. And so what they're actually doing right now is going to take advantage of those managed identities and easily get all of your sensitive information. And all it's doing is acting like it's supposed to do. Like that's actually the permissions that are granted for that aspect. The next thing the adversary is going to do is get back onto the server and actually see if that server has any tools. So they're actually going to install Mimikatz, and we'll take it from there on the next page. So as you can kind of see, this is an area that is unfortunately growing from an adversary perspective. And why is that? It's because Gartner projects over the next 5 years a 20 to 22% growth year over year in cloud services. And we know that organizations such as yourselves are trying to take advantage of these cloud services, whether it's like generative AI type services or any kind of cloud native services, microservices, APIs, containers, etc. One of the things that we know is that microservices allow you this immutable infrastructure. It scales to your business. The thing, though, is anytime adversaries see this growth of anything, they're going to start pivoting towards that service. Now, as you kind of look at these numbers, there's a lot of numbers right here. We all have seen the $4.45 million from IBM's cost of a data breach. The part that stands out to me, and I think is going to be really important for organizations over the next couple of years, is this 54% of organizations do not include DevSec security in the DevOps process. If you're familiar with how Microsoft recommends doing cloud deployment, one of the key pillars is infrastructure as code. Well, if you're doing infrastructure as code with templates that are misconfigured, all you're doing is introducing misconfigured services into your environment. And so one of the things we'll be talking about today is both infrastructure as code scanning, but also how to actually do more of like dev security and an incredible partnership. So I'm going to move to the next slide and actually talk about like how attackers go. We know that attackers go for the least amount of effort. Historically, it was phishing, it was brute force attacks, it was scanning for 3389 and 22 and these other kind of services. We've seen over the last couple of years an actual shift to a lot of the cloud workloads. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is data exfiltration. We know of a large organization that unfortunately had a misconfiguration on their firewall, which allowed access to one of their servers. The adversary got a hold of that server and did exactly what I just did, is they used the managed identity to access about 100 million customer records. So this is talking about like real big scale issues here. The other part here, the ransomware, we've actually seen one of our largest customers unfortunately had a Kubernetes dashboard exposed to the internet. They did this malicious code injection and were actually able to do like commands on it. For the customer, it only resulted in crypto mining, but had the same thing been applied, it could have easily led to a ransomware attack. This is the threats that we are facing as defenders. And unfortunately, we know that the defenders are struggling. The number on the right is, to me, the most significant number. Coming from the incident response, for years, I can tell you that it was always due to basic hygiene issues. Not having MFA, not having updating, not patching, not doing cloud misconfigurations or remediation. So basic security hygiene was the root of all of the problems. And Oz, I know you have a personal story about this.
Yeah, thanks, Drew. So actually, in a previous life, like working in another company, it was a security company, and we protected customers and their data systems, so it was critical for us to keep the service up and running. And one of the attacks that took us down and really hurt us because customer data was exposed was due to misconfiguration. This was the entry point, how they got in. It was some, mistreated configuration that was left there, and they got them in. And from there, it went on. It was a terrible event. So I really relate to this point and how you presented this. It's number one issue to close, to clean, and to make sure that our configuration are well tightened.
Completely agree, Oz. And we also know defenders are struggling because there's so many signals that are coming at them today, right? Like you have traditional endpoint server vulnerabilities, now you have code vulnerabilities, now you have secret vulnerabilities, identity vulnerabilities, cloud application vulnerabilities. The list goes on and on. So this is why we're actually seeing, unfortunately, only about 13% of vulnerabilities and exposures are actually being remediated. But I want to ask you, in a historic world, if you had two servers, one server has like a CVE of 9.9, the other has a CVE of 9.5, you would have always done the 9.9, right? But what if I told you server 9.9 is on an isolated network, doesn't have any sensitive information, it's just a dev server, and that 9.5, your domain admins have logged in, is network joined, it's got managed identities to sensitive information. So what we're saying today is, if you're only going to be able to do 13%, let's make sure we're doing the right 13%. And how do we do that? What we're asking customers is, like, what is happening in your cloud environment? Where are your resources? NIST cybersecurity framework says identify, protect, detect, respond. You can't protect, detect, or respond unless you've identified the services. Unfortunately, most ransomware attacks, about 90%, are due to unmanaged services. Where is my data? More importantly, where is my sensitive information? Where is the data that adversaries are going after? What's internet facing? Should those resources be internet facing? And how do I discover my highest priority? How do I make sure that my 13% that I'm remediating is the one that has sensitive data involved? It's the one that could actually be exploited. And this is why, for Microsoft, we're really highlighting this idea of a risk-driven approach. So the first thing is, as you're taking all of those signals, sensitive information, as you're taking things like internet exposure, as you're taking potentially of exploit, all of this information correlated together creates a risk-driven approach. One of the things that I also always say is, if you've ever heard Sun Tzu's Art of War, if I know my enemy and I know myself, I'll win every battle. Our adversaries have this outside-in view of our environments. Why are us as defenders not also looking at it as how our adversaries are seeing us? How are we also understanding our adversaries and what are they targeting and what vulnerabilities are they exploiting? So also mapping your environment both from an inside-out approach, but also from an outside-in, so what they're doing and what they're seeing. And this is this idea of a unified solution portal. So years ago, we came up with this idea as an industry of XDR, bringing all of these extended detection response signals together. What we're saying is do the same thing for vulnerability management. And all of it needs to be AI powered, right? Fully as much autonomy as you can, but also using it to help you with your remediation. And with that, Oz, I'd love to hear about how we do this.
Thanks. So hopefully we have enough tension here and you're excited, and this is the product that is going to relieve all pain and solve the issues. We actually divide the product into 3 pillars. And the first one on the left, if you think about cloud and the main challenge, you want to stop everything before it gets to runtime, before it gets too late in the process. This is why we are sitting on the left side, closer to the code, and taking care of scanning and identifying issues throughout the code lifecycle and deployment from build to ship, trying to identify secrets, vulnerabilities, malware, anything that can be an issue later on in the process should be identified earlier as much as possible. But then as you move to the right in the middle, it's not enough. We also take care of your runtime environment. This is our CSPM solution. The solution is actually based on a disk scan technology, meaning that you don't need to install agent. The environment is getting scanned, all your resources, critical resources, identified, and we are connecting and creating linkage between them. And we call those attack path. So we identify how attacker are going to move and what is the potential risk when we cross from one point to the other and eventually land on a sensitive database, on a key vault from an internet exposed VM, as an example. So all of this is done with the CSPM solution. We're going to get back to this product later on today. On the right side, since at Microsoft we assume bridge, we know that one day things going to go sideways and you need to be prepared for that. And this is why we are providing the best security solution with detection and response for your critical workloads at the cloud. And all of this is now streamlined directly to your XDR environment, available for your SOC in their native environment, and we're going to see this today. And I promise you demo, and it's just give me one more slides and we are almost there. So cloud is not disconnected from everything else that we do in Microsoft. And lucky for us, we get all the benefits from the threat intelligence and the huge information that we are collecting in Microsoft, and this is fitting into our product. In addition, all the magic of AI is also applicable for us, and we're helping with AI for security, helping team to work better, to work faster. At least this is the stage where we are today, how we leverage AI to accelerate the teamwork. In addition, in the middle here, you see something new, exposure management. Exposure management. This is a new product we announced yesterday. It's now GA, available for all of you. And our product is integrated as part of the huge, large enterprise exposure view. So the CSPM is the cloud part within that layer. So let's move to the announcement, and from there to the demo. And we divided the announcement here today in 2 parts. We will start with the proactive or the pre-bridge aspect of the tool that we are providing. So first of all, we are announcing today an integration that we did with a company called Endor Labs. They're with us today. And Endor gave us a very unique technology. They're able to identify code reachability and to tell us if this piece of code is actually reachable, it's being used. This is what code reachability means. So if we get this piece of information and now apply it on the total results and all the recommendation and the queue of work that your team need to drive, we can now shrink and narrow down the amount of work to what really matters the most. Because your team are using multiple different resources and like they're taking different artifacts from the internet or whatever. Those contain vulnerabilities and some of them are even high severity. But if it's not used, this piece of code, then you can put it down in the list of tasks. So we're going to show you today how this integration contributes to reducing the work of your team. The second part here is AI SPM, so we are in this era of AI, and your team embracing the new technology even without you noticing, and they are creating new and new applications that are running on top of generative AI models. And we are in stage 1 when it comes to security. Remember the questions that Drew just went over? It's number 1 question, what do I have? Like, where is it? We need to know. It's kind of the shadow IT phenomena because people are running very fast and this is critical. By definition, AI application need full access to data and it has no boundaries, like it's not something that you can define as a strict set of rules. This is how it behaves. It's unpredictable. So we need to identify it, we need to tell you what is the risk, what are the misconfiguration, is there any risk in the model itself, and connect all of this to our CSPM solution. And then on the post-bridge side, we are continue the journey that we started a year ago, where we connected all of our workload protection to the XDR and added the detection and investigation capability that are now streamlined and available for the XDR analyst in his native environment. And today we are exposing another step in this process by adding response sections. And the response are coming also with additional evidence and capability to perform hunting and find extra information that the analysts need in order to take this action. And we're going to present this today with a container solution.
So as we start with the posture management, I always give the saying that John Lambert, who's the head of our Microsoft research, says, defenders think in graph, attackers think in graphs, defenders think in list. If this continues, we'll never succeed. And so what I mean by that is, and exactly like Oz was talking about, is this idea of attack path analysis. So I'm going to get in there and actually show you kind of how to do the hunting and the posture management. The first piece of this is attack path analysis. So what it's saying to you is that you have an internet exposed Azure virtual machine that could move laterally to a storage account that contains sensitive information. What we're doing is we're discovering, are there secrets, are there managed identities, et cetera. So that virtual machine has secrets on the box to a Linux machine that has a managed identity to that storage account that contains sensitive information. You know, PII, PHI, personnel number, et cetera, of that nature. So this has actually been out for a while, but one of the things that we're very excited to announce is the API security posture management. So as you're kind of filtering down here, you can look for things like sensitive information, sensitive data disclosure, but then I can also go to this add filter here and look for resource type. Generative AI runs on APIs, so you have, if you're going to do generative AI securely, you have to secure the APIs. So right here you see an internet exposed API that would allow you to access sensitive information. I'm going to kind of show you an example of how one button in the portal can be the difference between your sensitive data being safe and your sensitive data being at risk. And that one button is subscription required. There's a couple of other ways to do this, but this is one of the ways that I could require authentication into my APIs. I just clicked that because if it wouldn't have been clicked, it wouldn't have shown you the lateral path movement. So right now I'm going to run it real quick, And what you're going to see is this is my brute force attack against the APIs. Hits it 20 times. So now I'm going to run this, and you're going to see access denied, access denied, access denied, access denied. Everything's good because it's secure. But you know what? I'm going to go uncheck that button, click one, save, clear out that script, and rerun the exact same script, and you're going to see 20 different credit card numbers and social security numbers at risk. Why? Because that's how the cloud works. It's all configuration, and if you're misconfigured, you're going to allow sensitive data to be exposed. So a key pillar of this, though, is this DevOps approach. I've got to do infrastructure as code properly. I can't have that button not clicked in my environment. And so what we're going to do is kind of pivot over and actually talk about our DevOps tool set. Things like infrastructure as code findings, things like container image scanning, and our new partnership with Endor. As you can see with this portal, I have the ability to see all of my findings across my Azure DevOps repos, against my GitHub, and my GitLab environments. This is for the security team. But now, as I pivot over, I'm actually going to show you from your developer standpoint, right? So they can see these infrastructure as code findings. They can see that you have container image issues. They can see that you have S3 buckets exposed to the internet, because we do AWS, we do GCP, we do Azure. So your developers have the ability to see in theirs, but maybe they don't have the time or the ability to actually remediate everything. So they need to be able to remediate the right 13%. And this is where the partnership with Endor. You can see this one is reachable, which means it could be exploited, and the bottom one is unreachable, so it wouldn't actually be able to be remediated. What you're probably wondering is, as the security team, how can I quickly find this information? And this is, this is actually the integration aspect with Endor Labs. One of the neat things, this is our first partnership where it's a direct integration. You can easily apply it in the portal to bring that in. And now we're going to go to the Cloud Security Explorer. So Cloud Security Explorer is the way to quickly query across your environment. So that first example that I showed you, give me all of my virtual machines that are exposed to the internet that have vulnerabilities. And I can do vulnerabilities, say high, critical, such of that nature. So if I know where my inventory is and I know where my internet exposure is, it's these two buttons right here, right? So easy peasy, and now I at least know my EC2 instances or my Azure servers that are exposed. The next thing that we love is the fact that you can also query your DevOps environment. So I can quickly say, give me all of my repos, give me all of my repos that have vulnerabilities, and this actually allows you to kind of see it from the security standpoint, what your developers are doing, and more importantly, where your developers are deploying code that has vulnerabilities. Now, the next part, though, is my favorite of all. But before we get there, I'm going to show you, within these things, I can see the CVEs, I can see information about which repository it is, I can look at information about the vulnerability. It will even allow me to go to the resource URL, so it will redirect me to the repo. So all of this is there. But I told you my favorite part is next. If any of y'all remember December 9th, 2021, Log4j was a very bad day for a lot of security organizations, right? The next piece that we released is this ability to say, give me all of my images that are actively running that have the vulnerability and the repos that push those vulnerabilities. So I can quickly remediate that. But now that we partnered with Endor, I can also say, give me all of those vulnerabilities that are actually reachable or actually exploitable. So if I go back to this mindset, I'm only remediating 13% of my vulnerabilities, then I'm actually making sure that I'm only remediating the ones that are actively running in my environment, exposed to the internet, and actually exploitable. So I'm narrowing down the ability, so I'm giving my developers a much shorter list of things that I need them to go do in exchange for knowing that I'm not just asking them to go just remediate for fun. I can tell them that this is actually exploitable. And we can give them the file URL. We can give them the actual repo. We can also give them the information about which registry it's being stored in, and the Kubernetes cluster that it's actually being ran in. And so what this will allow me to do is tell them, hey, go query on the specific label, go query on the specific tag. all of this will make their jobs easier to remediate, because I am asking them to remediate this because it's exploitable, and yes, we need them to do it, but I need them to do it as fast and as efficient as possible. Now, when we click into this, all of this information is just recommendations. And so if I go to like my container registry, I'll actually look at my resource health, and I'll see like this is a registry that has a vulnerability because, as we just announced, we're actually scanning JFrog, we're doing and Docker, and now Azure Container Registry, ECS, and GAR. But we talked about AI security posture management, and I want to make sure I get to that. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to these recommendations, and we're going to actually filter down. I want to look for things like just the Azure OpenAI services, right? This is probably my favorite part because we know generative AI is growing, and we got to make sure we do it right. Because guess what? If you got bad data you're training it on, you're just getting really bad results a lot faster. So I want to look at, is my AI services exposed to the internet? Would it allow for something like a remote code execution like the LangChain? Would it allow for lateral movement? We also do data scanning on the code for LangChain. But now I can see all of my recommendations that are exposed to the internet, and this specific one saying it's got local basic authentication. I can see the risk factors. I can see the MITRE attack framework. I can also see any information on how to remediate this. But this is a lot of information, so I actually just asked Copilot for security, like, how do I quickly remediate it? It gives me the scripts that say, here's how you can remediate it via PowerShell, here's how you can remediate it versus Bicep, and how to remediate it versus Azure templates. So this is the ability to get all of that information, quickly remediate it, and so I could be a lot more secure. Now I'm going to shift to the threat detection side. This is all posture management. This is getting the 13%, trying to minimize that 99% of successful attacks, basic hygiene issues. So now let's move to the SOC. This is one that's very personal to me. Like, defenders are overwhelmed. Specifically the last one. 2 in 5 security leaders feel that their employees are going to be burned out. I can personally tell you that I left the incident response team because I got burned out. It's a very every day the pressure is on you to like find the next adversary, and you've got all of this information coming at you very quickly, and it's coming from all of these different places, right? We talk about these 50 different security tools for an average organization, and it's not getting any better, right? Like, we can look at the top one. There's 275% growth in ransomware attacks in just the last year. The bright side with this number, I will say, is that attacks that have actually resulted in encryption has decreased by about 67%, and that's because of tools actually disrupting it automatically and other nature. But this is a world that just continues to grow, and our SOC analysts and our team members are definitely fatigued. And so what we're trying to say is, how can we help them be more efficient? And this is where this unified integration with XDR comes into play. This allows you to detect all of your attacks across your environment. And so what I'm going to demo for you here is actually how, if I was on the SOC team, that I would have investigated that very first attack that I did. So historically, what I would do is go to Defender for Cloud. I would go to Defender for Cloud, and I would look at the alerts panel. And this is how most of your cloud alert tools have. They have their own portal. And I would go into security alerts. I would probably look for a specific subscription or a specific project. I would then say, I'm hunting Kubernetes today. Like, I've got an active attack that I think might have started with a Kubernetes cluster, so I'm going to filter down on that. And I'm going to have the ability to see, what is critical alerts, what's my high alerts, what's my low fidelity alerts, et cetera, of that nature. You can see binary drift is something that we've introduced just recently. But if I go to the very last one, I'll start looking at all of those tools, that network scanning that we were talking about, or that cloud access to metadata that we did earlier. And so you can see here, when I view full details, I actually go and I can actually look at the tool that was ran, the script that was ran. It can give me information about which cluster was affected. It can give me information about which tactics the adversary used. I can look at the resources. I can actually look at the individual registry that were attacked. And so this gives me the ability to really focus in on this alert. The next thing that I'm going to do is look at that cloud access metadata, right? But if you see here, I've got 3 pages of alerts for that one subscription, basically that one cluster. I get a lot of details, which is incredible. But this is why we're very excited to bring this into the XDR portal, because this gives me the ability to start looking at more context. Now, many of y'all may be using M365 Defender. You may be familiar with initiatives, but initiatives are just an idea of a consolidation of alerts. So I'm going to start looking in the alerts, just like I was doing in the MDC portal, and maybe I want to do it based on a category. Maybe I want to do defense evasion. So based on the MITRE ATT&CK framework, I want to see all of the areas that an adversary might have done a defense evasion. So I see, we're going to look at 30 days, and I see some Kubernetes events deleted. Is it a big deal? Maybe not. It's a low alert, but I'm going to still I'm looking at that. I'm going to look into it. So I get some really great information. A lot of that same information that you got in the MDC portal. It tells me what the MITRE ATT&CK category was. It was the evidence that supports it. It gives me the alert description. But at the bottom, it actually tells me that it's part of an incident. And it's associated with an incident that's high. Remember, that's that collection of alerts. And so I'm going to look at this incident page. And what this tells me now is wait a second, I had a low fidelity alert. It was just Kubernetes events deleted, but now I'm actually looking at it hands-on keyboard attack I can see it actually started 2 weeks before that I thought it was. I see log tampering activity going on, so an adversary is trying to manipulate some logs. I see that network scanning tool, and I saw that earlier in my MDC portal. But now I start seeing things like Mimikatz being dropped. I see tools like LSA dump, and I start seeing access to my domain controller. What you can see, though, is a lot of these were prevented. And this is the bad one, right? Lateral movement to my domain controllers was blocked. So what happened when I ran this attack in real life is I kept getting blocked, so I had to manipulate it and turn stuff off. But you can see at the top, it says lateral movement but attack disruption. This is why we're very excited, because this brings all of that tool set in the Defender for Cloud into the ability to actually automatically disrupt these attacks. Going back to why we've seen such a decrease in ransomware success is because of this information. Now, I'm going to ask Copilot, what's going on here? Because this is a lot of information. And so Copilot for Security is going to easily break down line by line as an analyst of what's going on. It's going to tell me the initial access. It's going to tell me the classification. It's going to also tell me any kind of remediation actions that were taken, what scripts were blocked, what users were locked out. And you can see it here. I can have the ability to isolate devices. Remember, I turned some of this off so I could actually do this attack. Which users was automatically disrupted. It'll also give me things like, do I need to contact an administrator, or do I need to do anything of that nature? Now, I just logged into the threat analytics report. Maybe I've never seen a Kubernetes cluster attack. This is actually a full end-to-end report of what we as Microsoft see as the threat analytics on Kubernetes attacks. It'll tell me what kind of node alerts are available, what kind of cluster alerts might be there. It'll show pod things that we're seeing in the environment. So this is our TI that we're giving to you. It also tells you how to actually kind of remediate this, and what, more importantly, from a threat hunter perspective, what the bottom is actually giving you queries that you can run in your environment to see if any of this activity. So this is like a privilege escalation on a pod. I'm going to save that for just a second while I go and look, were there any other impacted resources? What were those recommendations that I could fix in my environment? And now I'm going to go back to the incident and look at what we call our evidence and response actions. So this is going to tell me things like, were there files included that were blocked? Were there, what were the malicious files that were the evidence that the adversary was doing something wrong? But I can also go down here to my Kubernetes pod, and this is what we're very excited about, is the ability to start doing things like isolating or terminating pods. So I'm going to isolate this pod, cut it off from network access outside of being for Defender for Cloud while I do my investigation. So we're going to isolate it. You can run the network policy on the Kubernetes cluster. You can see that it can't do anything except for communicate to Defender for Cloud. And how you can validate this is you can actually go into what we call our Action Center. So our Action Center is where any of these things that we've done, remediation or anything of that nature, you can quickly go in and see any kind of auto remediation tools in your environment. And so you go here, you'll actually see that I have those pods that were isolated. I can look at the history and anything that's pending. So now I know that I'm safe. Let me go back to my advanced hunting logs. Let me take that query that we said in the threat analytics report and start doing my own hunting. You know, like Microsoft, thank you so much for giving me all this information, but I want to make sure everything else is clean in my environment. So this is what we're doing to help our team, our analysts, actually do their own threat hunting in a one unified portal. With that, Oz.
Okay, so we promised a lot of demo. That's it. Now let's try to summarize everything and leave enough time for, in case you have some questions, we'll try to answer them. So when we look at our announcement today and the direction that we are taking in the cloud security space, it starts with the risk-driven approach. We saw a couple of examples today, but in order to really prepare ourselves for a risk approach, we need to go wide. What does it mean? It means that we cannot continue and live within silos of security tools. We need to have visibility on all tools and all data, connect everything together, because only then we are entitled to say that we are managing your risk. So it also means that we, as Microsoft, must be much more open and admit and recognize the fact that you guys are using different security tools. And we need your help to tell us what kind of security tools we should invest in connecting and bringing into our platform. We are adding more and more of those connectors. We are opening this section in the portal, and you can see today. And my expectation for next year is to see 10 times more the number of connection there. And then once you have all of this data, you can start managing risk, and then you can also apply the cool logic that we saw with reachability and stuff, and it becomes very, very effective for your day-to-day teams. In addition, when we move to the second middle section here, we talked about 360, about management experience, but to be honest, it goes much more than just the management. For a true CNAPP solution, we need to have both pre-bridge and post-bridge, and we need to have marry them together and unlock new set of capability, a new screens and new experiences that are not available for you today. And this is what we are trying to do right now. We are starting to release those set of capability in one management space and make this as the next evolution for CNAPP. And on the right side here, the last pillar, AI. Obviously, we are excited about AI, and we saw a few examples how we use AI today. Drew used the Copilot in a very intuitive way during his investigation, and it helps our team perform their work better and move faster. But it's more of an assistance role, right? The next quantum leap for the industry is when you take AI, when you take those technology, and let's call this automation, and you bring them in front of the people. And once this starts to happen, and we've seen a very small, tiny example to this with the disrupt example during the attack that Drew actually mentioned that he got blocked by the system. It happened to him. This is when we become much more efficient as a team. Our tools start to work for us. And this is the day where we will flip the game for the defender side. So if we look to the future, where we are investing, it's definitely in this area. This is how we think we can take AI and all the automation and technology to the next area of cloud security. And what all of this means, it means that we are much more efficient. We have higher security fidelity that with less false positive, thanks to all of the data and the TI and everything that we shared with you and the large space that we cover here at Microsoft. And then we managed to accelerate the work, and all of this eventually translated to saving in cost. So I'm not saying this. This is coming from a respectable analyst firm, Forrester. They did the analysis. They talked to many of our customers, and they brought those numbers. And they also brought a couple of quotes from customers. This is what customers are saying about the experience, about the product that we just presented. Obviously, I'm not going to read all of this. This is the last slide. We encourage you to stay with us for the rest of the week and watch the other show and participate. And we actually have like 4 minutes in case there are questions, and happy to take any of those. Thank you. We will stay here in case you have questions and want to talk, so you're welcome.
Thank you, everyone.